I think we're happening. This is happening. Hi. Facebook would like me to share this with the 20-minute delay group, but that's okay. I don't need to do that. Interesting that it gave me the option, though. If I do a live about traveling as an author, should that ever start to happen again, maybe I'll share it with 20-minute delay. Hi, everybody. 20-minute delay is my podcast that I do about travel, which, interestingly enough, has been still going lately. We've been talking about nightmare travel scenarios and things like that of our past. But hi everyone. Sorry, that was a non sequitur to start us off. Watch Gail pick up a fish and wave it at you. Welcome to the live that I am doing at the beginning of the year in January of 2021. Who knew we would make it? And I don't really have anything planned. Vixen Ecology, the short story that's set in the San Andreas universe, is coming out. So if you get the chirp, that'll be there soon. Basically, I have sent this short story to my copy editor, and I'm just waiting for her to get the copy edits back to me, and then I'll put it up and send out an announcement to you. Oh, thank you for saying you enjoy 20-minute delay. I have a lot of fun with that. I decided, this is how these lives go, you guys know this by now, but I decided to do 20-minute delay as sort of a separate thing because traveling like solo as a female is such an interesting experience, so, but it doesn't it's not necessarily tangential to what I write, so that's why 20-minute delay is sort of another entity. This is a faux fur trimmed. You guys, I'm not doing well today. A faux trimmed capey thingy. I have two of them. I have the brown one and then I have a cream one, and I will probably buy more because I love them. They are warm and fuzzy, and they look very fashion forward from the shoulders up. It's just kind of what you need in this day and age. Hello, Mike. Thank you very much. Hi, David. Hi, everybody tuning in. Yeah, it is what it is. Yes, I'm wearing my fuzzy cape. I'm also wearing, it's very cold, for little thin-skinned me. I'm also wearing a vintage cashmere sweater, which I love to death, and then a bow blouse. And I might also be wearing some Under Armour underneath it all. It's very cold. Yes, so, yes, Vixen Ecology is coming out soon-ish, as soon as I get that all uploaded and formatted and all that sort of thing. The other exciting thing I've done recently is I made a schematic for the Heroine's Journey. So I've posted it on the Heroine's Journey page on my website. It's also linked to the announcement posts and everything, but people were asking for one, and I finally just got excited to try using Canva in order to make one, so I did. So it's out and about now. You can find that. I'll post it to Instagram shortly as well. Dublin, hi! Wow, I was in Dublin not too long ago, actually. Lovely place. Anyway, sorry, yes, traveling, and suddenly, I'm actually a homebody, so I really don't mind not traveling, but it turns out that eventually I do mind it. I do miss it. I miss seeing you guys in person. I miss going out about into the world and being annoyed by airplane travel, and delighted by train travel. But anyway, I like I said, I don't really have a plan for today's live, so I was just gonna see where we went. If anybody has any questions about writing or life or the universe, I'll do my best. I'm not sure I could really handle the universe, but I'll give it a try. I'm not drinking tea today, as you can see, just for no good reason. I already had tea, couldn't be bothered to make it. I know there must be something wrong with me. What else has been going on? For those of you who saw the chirp, I'm maybe going kind of off grid for a while, and that means that I'm not sure I'll be doing a live next month, because the internet will suck. So yeah, Charity is saying that lack of travel has some nice boots for walking. Yeah, the interesting thing about a wardrobe that is designed for one lifestyle and then swapping out for a wardrobe that's designed for a completely different lifestyle is suddenly I'm like, oh right, why don't I just buy fleece-lined leggings? Because they exist and I'm cold, and it's no longer a thing where if I'm traveling I always want to do layers. Just want to be warm. Emma says that they hope my family's okay. We will see. That's what I was gently alluding to. I don't know. That's part of the thing, but it's not my secret to tell, so I can't really talk about it. But yeah, but everybody's trying family things, I think, right now, so I'm not alone. Robert wants to know if I watched Drag Race. Ooh. And Canada's this is good. I don't watch Drag Race. I don't watch a lot of ongoing television shows. Except for now I've gotten into Korean drama, so I should say I used to not watch a lot of ongoing television shows. But I just forget what day it is and miss them all the time and end up giving up. Back in I will watch like Great British Baking Show and stuff like that. Is the universe infinite? So far as we know, or so far as the limits of human comprehension is concerned, yes. The universe is in fact infinite. But then what is infinite if our own brains cannot encompass the concept of infinity? I'm looking to see if we have any questions, and also waffling on about epistemology at the same time. Straying into the world of philosophy of knowledge, in which I have a minor from many, many, many years ago. The reality of sense perception is something that's always interested me greatly. In another life, I would have been a fuddy-duddy old professor waxing poetical about Plantica. We have questions. When you do a question for me, I would greatly appreciate it if you would put a question mark at the beginning so that I know it's a question. And then when I'm scrolling through like I was just doing, I can find the question. And make a little humming noise, which is apparently what I do when I'm scrolling for questions in feeds. So yes, I'm afraid I don't watch Drag Race. I'm not against it. I just haven't gotten into it. The universe is infinite. We handled that one. What am I drinking today? I am drinking spritzers. I'm one of those weirdos who really likes flavored fizzy water, but I don't like to drink sugar ever in any form. It's just one of my philosophies. I like sugar. It's my drug of choice. But I realized that, when you ingest sugar, like a soda or something, it's like the same amount as a candy bar, and I would just rather have the candy bar because I like the food part. I like the chewing of the food. So I prefer to take my sugar in sweets form rather than soda form. And so these little, flavored watery things are exciting to me. I have a dehydration issue in that I always forget to drink water. I never forget to drink tea. I always forget to drink water. And so getting myself hydrated in any way is a good thing. And so it turns out that if you make it fizzy and slightly flavored, that I drink it. So yay me. If I could live in any country, ooh, Emma, what a good question. I haven't visited all the countries yet. So it'd be really hard for me to make a choice. And I always say that I feel like having done like long stints of living in foreign countries as part of my previous career, that like I can pretty much live anywhere for 2 years. So permanent residency is slightly different than like, say, a couple of years somewhere. But I love the idea. Where would it be? So I would love to live in northern Italy. It's one of my favorite places in the world. The Tuscan area, or the Lake Como area in particular. Plus I would love to learn Italian, and I feel like I would learn it best if I were immersed in the culture there. So that's a big one for me. I fell in love with and totally adored Singapore, and I would love to like live in Singapore for a while and do like extensive travel in that part of the world, because I feel like Singapore would make a great base for that kind of travel. If I had to pick a place to relocate for a permanent residency, like say retirement or something like that, maybe when I wasn't traveling as much as I am now, I've always loved New Zealand. It's one of my favorite places in the world, and I just like everything about New Zealand, except the food. I mean, the food such as it is good, but it doesn't have like the range of food that I really love. But I could just travel. That would be how I would solve that problem. I'm like, missing Thai food, I'll just go to Thailand for a while. These are my fantasies, mind you. These aren't actually practical ideas. So yeah, so those are some of the places I can imagine myself living. But yeah, I think one of like life goals would be to sort of live in part of Europe for a while and then just really travel extensively in that area, and then like up and move to a part of Asia and live there for a while and travel extensively. Because it's just so nice to have a home base in a country, you know, that's kind of near to where you want to travel to or something like. Yeah, so that's what I would do. Those are just off the top of my head. But if I had to move for permanent residency somewhere, then I would love to go to New Zealand, just because I really like it there. I like the people. I like the ruralness of New Zealand. For many, that's like the hardest thing to handle. But I grew up in the middle of nowhere, so I don't really mind that. So yeah, there it is. David says his electric blanket years old. I feel ya. Rosalind wants to know about Bridgerton. So for those of you who aren't aware, there was so much conversation about Bridgerton in the Parasol Protectorate fan group on Facebook that I had to create a thread for Bridgerton so that we could just have this massive discussion about it in one place. I did watch it. I binged it, so I watched everything back to back, which might not be the best idea. I'm not sure. But I have tons of thoughts on it. And those thoughts are like, as a consumer, as of historical dramas, and then there are thoughts as a author adapted, and then there are thoughts on sort of the controversial nature of various different aspects of Bridgerton. So I have like, I don't know that I am the best author to talk about Bridgerton because I am not particularly widely read in historical romances of the type. I have read one Quinn book that I recall, and of course I've read Austen and stuff like that, which are the sources for most historical romance tropes. And I did read like Judith McNaught and stuff for whom Quinn is the scion. So, you know, but I don't think I'm extensively read enough to really be able to speak eloquently about adapting that kind of historical romance. Although I will say that I personally feel like where Bridgerton does run into problems, it's with the romance story arc, and being a little too faithful to how it was written. I should say I'm not one of those authors who insists on books being adapted exactly as written to television or film. I tend to feel like when you transition something from one form to another media form, so from the written word to the visual, the word adaptation is being applied for a reason, and that is, it is a reinterpretation of the initial work, and the most successful movie adaptations of books are reinterpretations. That's one of the reasons I really love the Howl's Moving Castle reinterpretation, because what Studio Ghibli did was take a fantastic book and change it significantly in order to bring it to an anime style on the big screen, and I thought it was beautifully done. I love both the book and the movie, but I don't think they're like necessarily directly correlative. And that, for me, is why it's a successful adaptation. I am not sure I would qualify Bridgerton as a successful adaptation under those kind of auspices. Anyway, so here I am being very, like, talking a lot about something about which I know nothing. How clever of you, Lady Catherine. Yes, so for me, Bridgerton was very successful in certain ways. I really loved how it did the anodized color reinterpretation of historical. That they didn't even try to be historically accurate and instead went with these character-informed costuming choices. I really liked that. It reminded me of Carol, the movie that came out a couple of years ago, which I highly recommend. But it was very interested in texture, in color. It very much like kind of signal markered the two different families. I thought all that was interesting. I wish they had pushed it more. I would have loved to have seen some like Hawaiian prints and like real crazy jarring things, a little bit like how Knight's Tale did. I happen to be a Knight's Tale apologist, so I really like that movie. I like kind of, if you're not going to try to be completely historically accurate, by all means, go crazy. That's exciting to me and interesting. And you get to watch the art of costume design being pushed. and I find that exciting as somebody who's into fashion. So I really liked that aspect. I really liked the kind of rom-com parody aspect, and I wish they had pushed it a bit more. I liked the soap opera aspect of Bridgerton, and I wish they had pushed that a bit more. I wish we had gotten a bit more multi-characters rather than a concentration on just the one central romance. So those are the places where, for me, it was really successful, which essentially meant the first 4 episodes were very successful. When it shifted and sort of became more grounded and more focused on the actual romance, I was less excited. And I say that as a romance reader, and a person who very much enjoys romance. So, it was just less interesting to me for the second half. And it felt a little like it dragged out. I thought maybe those 4 episodes could have been 2, could have been a 6 series arc in total. So, that's just sort of my personal opinion. If you loved it and you thought it was great, that's awesome. It looks like the dog roll is we're getting most of the rest of the books adapted, and each romance, so the way the Bridgerton series is written, each book is a different romance, and I think they'll probably do each season as a different romance, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they do that. I'm very interested to see Penelope's romance, because I would like to see both that actress, who I love, she's from Dairy Girls, and I liked that book story the best. That's the one I read. So I think that's going to be fun to see adapted. So I'm interested. I will watch more. I don't think it's going to be something I chronically rewatch the way I do certain Austen adaptations or anything like that. But I will definitely watch more series when they come along. Lavender wants to know if I have any new cozy book recommendations, because The House on the Cerulean Sea was their top book of 2020. Yay! I'm so glad. I loved that book so much, and I'm so glad to see it being sort of collectively embraced by the zeitgeist. So one of the things that happened to me in 2020 was I stopped reading, like cold turkey. I don't know why. Weird psychological thing, trying to manage my own creativity or coping mechanisms or something. So I really haven't read that much. I'm sorry to say, but I do have a list of comfort book reads out there. So if you Google Gail Carriger books that comfort the soul, I think that's the right terms, or Gail Carriger comfort read recommendations, something like that. This blog post should come up that has other recommendations. And I think it actually includes Cerulean Sea. I think it's a more recent blog post, so that one's on there. But yeah, that has exactly, and comfort books are so hard to define, but Cerulean Sea is a good launch platform for that concept. And I would say all the books that I picked and put on that list are like Cerulean Sea, although not exactly like it, because I haven't read a lot like it. So, but they should all be comforting. Debbie wants to know more about Vixen Ecology. So it is short. It is quite a short story. So don't expect too much. I talked to you guys a little bit. Oh, hello. I talked to you guys a little bit last live, I think it was, about that it had gotten it was very dark because I wrote it last year, or the middle of last year. And I didn't realize how dark it was until I was revising it, and then I sent it out to my beta readers, and my beta readers were like, ooh, baby, this is a bit dark for you. And I was like, oh, it is a bit dark. So I did do a revision pass, and I lifted it a bit. But it is a different style of writing for me. It's sort of stream of consciousness-ishness, and it's sort of atmospheric. It has a kind of fairy tale quality to it. So what I will be doing is when I send out the special announcement with the link to purchase, and it's going to be a charity thing, I'll include a sample, like the first, scene or the first couple of paragraphs, so you guys can read the style and decide then if it's for you or not, because it is different for me. It's not my usual thing, but it is lighter. Vixen Ecology, yes, will be on Gumroad first. For those who don't know, Gumroad is the platform that I use to sell directly. And it'll probably be on Gumroad only for a while, definitely for the first month, because I'm just going to do all of my sales from Gumroad for that month to the 2 charities that I've chosen for this book. So that's how it just makes it easier paperwork wise to just be like, okay, everything that's purchased from Gumroad for this month is going to go to these 2 charities. So yeah, so it will be on Grubhub only. I don't, honestly, because it is so different for me, and maybe you guys will let me know what you think about putting it out to a broader audience. It might just be for you. Like, I'm not sure it would really, it might be too jarring for like the casual Gail Carriger reader, for lack of a better term. So I'm not sure if it will eventually go up to like Amazon or anything like that. I might do it, but definitely not for at least a month. And that's after publication. Emma asks, which one of my books am I the most proud of? And has any audience reaction to a book release surprised you? Ooh, okay. Which one of my books am I most proud of? That's always hard because I tend to be really proud of the one I've written recently, but it's probably this one. I hate to tell ya. It's so hard to be a kind of natural fiction writer and then write nonfiction, even coming from an academic background and even being one of those people who always enjoyed writing essays for school and stuff like that. So it was just so much work, and it was such a huge risk for me that I did not want to take, but I felt like I had to take because someone had to give voice to these narratives and no one else was doing it. And I'm not a person who tends to take stances like that. It's just not my personality, but I sort of felt compelled to do it. So I think I'm probably most proud of the heroine's journey. In terms of my fiction books, what am I most proud of? That's really hard. I mean, like, Prudence was really hard to write. So, like, Prudence is one of the first fiction books that I was like, oof, wow. You know, but like Poison and Protect was the first major, like, career risk-taking story that I took. It's the first independent book that I wrote specifically just to publish myself, so I'm, like, really proud of that one, too. And then, like, Fifth Gender is such a weird little book that, like, that fact that anybody liked this book at all is really exciting to me. And that kind of answers the second half of the question, which is, what was the one that surprised you? And it's this one, which is, like, I didn't expect anybody to embrace this book. And in it has some just rabid fans who just love this more than anything. And I really had so much fun writing this book that it was a wonderful experience for me to write something totally outside of my normal scope, to really enjoy writing it just as a fiction experiment in a way, and then to have people actually enjoy reading it. So, like, those that's like, oh, hey, look at that. It's never gonna be the, like, crazy breakaway hit or bumper seller that Soulless was, but yeah. And the release that surprised me the most is, and probably always shall be, Soulless. I'm continually startled about the success of that book. I mean, it gave me a whole career, and I'm still kind of like, okay, oh, great, thank you everybody for loving my strange, you know, kitchen soup genre little book. Yay. Nicole wants to talk about follow-ups after NaNoWriMo. What's the next step to finishing a draft? What did I learn about my process from this, and any advice? That's a great question. So, for those of you who didn't follow, I did do a daily NaNoWriMo accounting podcast with my friend Dan, and two other debut writers or newer writers over on the Everyday Novelist podcast. Everyday split into 2 words. So you can check that out. There are 30 episodes for the month of November, and I think I maybe skipped 1 or 2. And we take all kinds of questions about new writing and crafted writing and stuff, but we talk about, and it was my first Nano. I've never done Nano before. I used Nano to finish up a book. That book is done. So we talked a little bit on the podcast about this, but what Dan and I kind of settled into it. Dan and I have been friends for years. We're both writers, and we both like talking about sort of the intellectual side of being a writer. So we talked about something that I call a hot pass, we decided to call a hot pass, I guess, which I highly recommend, which is after you've finished a manuscript, just the temptation is to like just stop, put it aside, and forget about it for a while. But I think it's actually really good while you're still thinking about what you wanted from that manuscript and the vision you had for it, and while it's still fresh in your head, to just reread the whole thing real quick. Just go through and do a quick revision. Make sure if you left yourself any notes, you still understand what those notes are about. Elaborate on those notes or fix those sections depending on how dedicated you want to be to it. And that's just because you're gonna forget what you wanted to do with that manuscript if you leave it for any length of time. So it's a great idea to just do one read through and use that as a time to either make notes about what you want to do with the book going forward, fixes and that sort of thing, or to make some of those fixes while you're still fresh having written it. Then you can put it to bed for a while if that's what you like to do. I like to do that. I like to put things to sleep. I like to leave projects for several months, go write something else, do something else, and then come back to it with completely fresh eyes. But I have learned not to do that while having left gaps that future me is supposed to fill in, because I'll forget what I want to do. So fill in the gaps, make any necessary fixes that are fresh in your brain, or write them down so your future self will thank you for that. So that is my second step process in Nano. I'm hoping that's the craft side of it. The business side of what you do with the draft is completely different. If that's what you want to know about, then ask another question and I will talk about that. What did I learn about my process? I learned that I am not a writer who writes every day. I don't like to do it, and it doesn't work for me. So there it is. I just have a natural cycle, which for me is focused writing times 4 or 5 days a week. I can do a write every day for up to maybe 10 days, but anything more than that and I just get really fatigued and I'm not interested and I need to take a brain break. So that's just me. I learned that about myself as a writer. I already wrote like that. I already tend to write on like scheduled time blocks during a week. And this just sort of confirmed that, like, if that wasn't my natural state, it is now after a decade of writing. So being a daily writer doesn't work for me, which means I will probably not do Nano again, unless, I'm forced to for some reason. Christina wants to know if I've tried a SodaStream. Yes, I have many European friends who have SodaStreams. I have the tiniest kitchen in the universe, though, so we have a no gadgets that are single purpose regulation in our house. I have a galley kitchen and a 600 square foot apartment, so there's no room for a SodaStream. There's barely room for a kettle, and that's non-negotiable. But I have experiences with SodaStreams. Angie wants to know what my favorite flavor of spritzer is. Oh, this is going to alienate many of you, but my favorite flavor is grape. I really like fake grape flavoring. Concord grape is the actual flavor. I like Concord grapes too, which taste like fake grape flavoring. I just love it. We tend to have the lime and the lemon because that goes with everything, but yeah. I love grape. Lavender wants to know if I have interesting new food stories. Well, I feel like I ate something recently that I got very excited about, and I thought I'll have to tell everybody about that, and now I've totally forgotten what it was. I'm still on the mochi donut kick. That's very exciting to me. I'm still putting a furikake seasoning on everything. Oh, I got obsessed with trying to make the perfect garlic noodles, and I actually managed to make garlic noodles that were too garlicky. I did not think that was possible, but yeah, they were so garlicky. Nicole wants to know, how do I handle incorporating... Oh, okay, I'm just going to read your question, Nicole. You handle incorporating the fables, traditions of other cultures very well. Do you have advice from including details from other countries while being careful of cultural appropriation? Well, I'm a white chick, so I don't know that I'm the best person to address this. I do it with love, rather like my love of food, and I do it with, what's the word? I am like care and gentleness, and admiration, I guess, is the voice that I'm coming from, and yeah, so, you know, and I use sensitivity readers. So generally speaking, you know, for like mana, for example, I will have an Asian sensitivity reader and and mana is multicultural as a character. And I have a queer identified male to female friend also do sensitivity reading for me. So, you know, that's kind of how I handle it. Community, like anything else, I guess. Reaching out to others. And I pay my sensitivity readers because I can, and I can afford to, and I'm taking up their valuable time. So, yeah, that's how I do it. A lot of research. I mean, it helps that I really love mythology. So I was raised on Greek mythology in the absence of all other forms of religion with my hippie parents. And I've always had a great passion for mythology. So, yeah, I investigate that. The balance that is hard to strike is also being funny because you can't punch down. So, so how to incorporate mythologies from other cultures, but also honor them, but also parody them, because I write parodies. That is the real challenge, and that's a very fine line to tread in this day and age in particular. But I hope I tread it with care. I try my very best. Sila asked what I liked about Bridgerton, and I think I covered that. There's some more Bridgerton conversation. Everyone's talking about Bridgerton these days. Including me, apparently. Moving along, scrolling. There's a whole Bridgerton conversation happening that I wasn't aware of because Facebook didn't show it to me. I'm looking for more questions. There are links and so forth. Robin has a question. When I say dark side, am I talking Jacqueline Carey's Kushiel Start series dark? Yes, that's kind of the level of dark that I'm talking about. Book 1. I would never go so far as to book 2 or book 3. Or if I did, I would be in a very strange headspace. There's no, like, physical torture or anything like that, don't worry. June asks about Vixen Ecology. I'm assuming, will it be an ebook? It will be only an ebook. The question is whether it will be audio or print, and the answer to that is, I don't think so. At least not at the moment. Maybe eventually. I don't like to box myself into any corners with absolutes. Moving along. You guys are so chatty. Looking for questions? Someday we'll come up with a better way of doing this. Piper, you're very cute. Talking about Piper Mommy. Piper, I have to ask, and we'll talk about this some other time. I've been teaching. One of the things I've been doing lately is learning Thai, very, very casually, or how to speak Thai. I have to know, Piper, if you call your mom meh or not, the Thai version of mom, or if it is always Piper Mommy. Boop. Chatter. Yes, the Hot Pass thing, Piper, incidentally, is a fantastic author and a very dear friend of mine, and is commenting in here. Yeah, the Hot Pass is an interesting concept. I used to not like when Dan first talked about the idea of a Hot Pass, which is like reading the manuscript right away, I was like, ooh, no, I don't like that. And then I realized, no, I actually do that. I always do one reread before I put anything aside. I just didn't think of terming it something. Robin says that their cat Sylvester likes potato chips, crackers, and seaweed snacks. What weird human foods does Lilliput the Bean go after? Seaweed snacks are a big one for her. I posted recently her expression upon having successfully stolen a piece of nori from moi and discovering that it was spicy wasabi flavored nori. Her little kitty face was like, what? What? Such betrayal. And I was like, you stole it from me. Like, you deserve it, cat. Yes, she really likes seaweed. Mostly she's not a huge fan of human food, thank heavens. She likes, breadcrumbs. So like I will have a piece of toast in the morning and then she'll lick up all the breadcrumbs. So that she likes breadcrumbs, but yeah, mostly. Oh, and she'll go after a piece of chicken, like, you know, like any sensible cat, if we leave a piece of chicken lying around. So she's taught us not to leave pieces of chicken lying around. It turns out, incidentally, in case anybody cares, that seaweed is not bad for cats. So, like, although I don't know about wasabi, but I don't think she got much of it. I'm sorry, I cannot read your name. Sela? If I mispronounce, I apologize. Which of my written characters do I enjoy the most? Well, I always like Lord Akildama as the reason he shows up in so many of my books, and that's because he's really easy to write. He's really fun. He kind of shows up and I'm like, oh, great, he's got this scene taken care of. He also always knows more than I do about what's going on, so I just let him speak. Even if he's speaking in euphemisms and eccentricities, it's probably going to be important later on in the book, or maybe a couple books in the future. So I kind of let Lord Akildama do whatever he wants. And I'm aware that he's not an independent personality, but it feels like that. He's kind of a vampire of my subconscious, so to speak. So I do like Lord A. But you could, like, the characters, certain characters, like, super snarky characters always make me happy. Like, Max and Marvin are both really fun to write in the San Andreas books. Triss was really fun to write in Fifth Gender because he's so excited about everything and everything is so new to him. He has this sort of sense of childish wonder as an alien amongst humans, and I kind of, and that also allows me to, like, talk with humor about how weird humans are as a species, even when we've gone off into the future and into space, and so I enjoyed that very much. So yeah, those are some of the characters I liked writing. Stein asks if I like Norse mythology. I'm not as familiar with it. My dad's a Dane, so I mean I did do some research into sort of, you know, the Viking mythoses and the Norse mythoses, but I'm weirdly not as I ought to be attached to it and interested in it, but I guess I'm not. You know, there are certain, like, what interests me in mythology is sort of shared archetypes and concepts across cultures. Like the trickster character, for example, which is an archetypal character. So I gravitate to Loki in the original sense of Loki, not the Avengers sense of Loki, although he's good too. But so, you know, those are the kinds of characters that kind of interest me in specific mythologies, like Norse mythology, which is, I think, why I'm attracted to the Kitsune. I like a capricious godling. That always is exciting to me. I think because I've always felt if I were a godling and had ultimate power, that's kind of what I'd end up doing with it. Just like farting around and messing with people and messing with people's lives and like sleeping around and like getting involved and like being really petty and trivial. My vampires are like that too, right? Like when I think about immortals and immortality and gods, like they're all kind of tricksters for me. It's funnier that way too, but that's what I would be like, I think. Just totally irreverent. I just would not care about anything anymore. I'm almost there anyway. I think when I become, you know, like a quality old lady, I shall, you know, just not care and just open my mouth and the worst things are going to fall out of it. But I won't care anymore, and I probably won't be on the internet. So yeah, I think that there are things about different mythologies that attract me, and they tend to be the more capricious mythologies. It's probably one of the reasons I'm not gravitated towards monotheism in any form. It's just not as varied. It's not as interesting. I like having lots of different gods. And I like them being occasionally unpredictable and erratic, because if you have no consequences for your actions, because you're never going to die and mortality is not a deal, then why wouldn't you be illogical and erratic and ridiculous? Just wear the silly hat. That's what I say. Even if you're Loki in a silly hat. Mandy asked a very interesting question, which is, did I do any research into autism or autistic spectrum when writing Percy's romance. I did not write Percy intentionally autistic in any way, which isn't to say that he's not. If you see that in him and you'd like to gravitate towards him and adopt him because of that, then absolutely do that. But no, I didn't intentionally write it, and that's why. Because if I was going to write him as that kind of a character, then I would have done a ton more research into it. So no, I just wrote him as, like, you know, one of my super awkward geeky friends, who maybe are on the spectrum, but, you know, I'm old enough for that not to have really been a diagnosis when I was first forming friendships and hanging out in the geek community and the queer community. So I'm just drawing on my own history and friendship groups for writing Percy, and perhaps it comes off that way, which is great, but it wasn't at all really intended. But yay, if you want him to be that way. He is so adorably awkward. Oh, but Mandy, that's a very, very kind thing to say. I really appreciate that. Yes, I love Percy. He's probably, speaking of favorite characters to write, Percy was great to write, because Percy is one of those characters where every time he's put in a situation, I had to check my own instincts. Because I'd be like, well, you know, Alexia or Arsenic or, you know, one of, you know, these forward, powerful, female, aggressive women, aggressive in a good way, characters is going to react the way I would react, because that's me-ish. But Percy is not. Percy's going to react completely different. Percy's going to, like, put up a wall and think about logic and go into Latin and do all of these other things. So he was a very interesting mind to climb into. But I climbed into him just knowing who he was as a person, kind of fully formed in my brain, not really thinking about him as representing a group in any way. Maybe I should have taken care with that. But I honestly didn't even think about him when I was writing him. I just wrote him the way he was in my head. And he was fun. Annie asks, sprinkles, yay or nay? Sprinkles on what? Donuts? Or ice cream? Or I would say nay as a general rule. Unless they have a really solid flavor of their own to them, you know, like they add a component, like the sprinkle is made up of something, like strawberry sprinkles, and they taste like actual strawberries. No, so they're sprinkles. Otherwise, you know, I don't need the extra sugar, just for a little bit of crunch. Ah, yay! Thanks, Piper. You answered my question. It's not like I couldn't have just called you up and asked you this question, but that is fantastic. That's so cool. Piper answered my Piper Mommy question. I have so many questions though that I'm trying to learn Thai. That's the wait this question again about Natalie wants to know if I like randomly funny books like Heinz's Terminal Alliance or The Janitor Saved the Day. Yes, I do. I do like just generally comedic sci-fi. It's rare. It's hard to find. It's rarely well done. But when I do find it, I get very excited about it and like it a lot. And Heinz is a great comic writer for anybody out there who's looking for sort of comedic writer who's still around, still writing. David asks, speaking of old ladies of quality, will we ever get the Golden Girls team up for Sophronia's crew later in life, as was hinted at in Reticence? Ooh, sorry. I got warm enough, finally. I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out. I think it'd be really fun. It is definitely an untapped genre of little old ladies kicking ass and taking names. I think it would be really fun to write. I will say that the next Delightfully Deadly book, it does encompass a long age range, and the bulk of the romantic arc and the story take place where the characters are in their 60s. So I am writing that, but not that exact iteration. And partly because I'm like, why can't I have a romance for characters in their 60s? There's nothing wrong with this idea. I like this idea. Licorice sprinkles. There is a sprinkle that has a dominant flavor. You're absolutely right. I don't love licorice. It is not one of the 3 foods I will never eat, but it is not something I really enjoy. I hate to say it. Yay, old ladies. Oh, hey, I'm caught up. Great. How are we on time? Oh, we're pretty good. So we got 15 minutes if anybody has any last questions. Yes, Vixen Ecology, then I have to write the next Delightfully Deadly book, which I just talked about. So that's what's next on the docket for me. So when I go off-grid, whenever that happens, I'm going to take that 2-week quarantine as an opportunity to kind of have a mini writing retreat. So that's the next project I'll be writing. It was supposed to be done by the end of February, and I don't think that's gonna happen. Sela asks what are the 3 foods that I won't eat. So I have a reputation, which I'm very proud of, amongst my friends, of being the taster. So a lot of my friends have allergies and are very picky, and I will eat anything 3 times. And so they will point at things when we're at like a buffet or at a party or something and be like, what is that? And I will just pop it in my mouth and then I will tell them. But there are 3 things I won't eat. Uni, only in sushi form. I'm sorry. I just can't take it. That is sea urchin. And I have had it very high end and very good. And it's just the way it sticks to the mouth. I just don't like it. And normally I don't care about textures. I like oysters raw or cooked. Like, I'm normally not fussy, but uni did it to me. However, there are some very interesting like savory custards with uni and cooked uni. I've had cooked uni and really liked it. So it's only in its sushi raw form that I won't do it again. I've given it the three try. And then durian. No. Oh, no. Oh, no. And then there is a kind of pig colon sausage called andouillette, and it's not andouille, it's andouillette, and it's French. That tastes exactly like you would imagine such a thing tastes. And that's not something I enjoy, as it turns out. So those are my 3, uni, durian, and andouillette. So far, everything else I've eaten has been fine, and I have eaten some very strange things and loved some of them to death, like sea snails, etc. And we got some more questions. Elaborate on the 2 secret projects. The 2 secret projects that keep showing up in the Chirrup are another special edition that's coming, but I still have to write more for it. So there'll be a hardcover special edition that's coming out. That is writing on me, so it's my fault I can't talk about it yet. I don't like to talk about a project coming out until I have actually at least finished a rough draft. Then I'll start talking about it, because then the hard part is done. And the rough draft for that is not done yet, so that's why I'm not talking about that one. The other one is a tie-in secret project, so it is not written. I'll put it that way. And it is dependent on somebody else. So I am waiting for my partner in crime to do the bulk of the work for that project. So that is why I am not talking about it, because I don't like writing checks for myself that I can't cash, let alone somebody else. I'm not going to put someone else in debt. So that's why that's why they remain secret. I promise, as soon as I know it can happen, I will talk about it. The problem is, if I start talking about something and then it does not happen, or it keeps getting delayed, I just am constantly fielding questions from people about those projects. So it's easier for me not to name them and not to talk about them, because if they're not named and not talked about, then you guys don't have an opportunity to get really excited about it. And then I don't have to disappoint you with delays or nothing happening. Rachel asks if I've heard about women's fiction books. Kristen Painter, yes. Mandy Roth, yes. So I've heard of Kristen Painter and Mandy Roth. So those are the 2 that I have heard of. Yes. I don't know much about them. I don't think I've read them. I think I've socially met Kristen, at least. Nicole says, the business side of follow-up for NaNoWriMo, what would be my advice in that realm? So for those of you who have finished an NaNoWriMo project, it's a book, you think it's a good book, you think it's solid, and you're like to maybe submit it, you still need to rest it. I would say most authors benefit from resting a book for at least a month, then picking it back up and doing another revision pass. I always do from 4 to 6 revision passes on everything I write before it goes out to anyone, beta readers or what have you. There are some exceptions to that. So my Nano project has had 2 revision passes, and my agent was like, I would like to see it, to see what to do with it. And she's like, I have a time slot right now. And I was like, okay, be aware that it's not been revised that much. But she's been my agent for 11 years. So like, you know, I don't mind her taking a look at it. So my first piece of advice is, with a Nano project in particular, because you have pushed yourself so much for it, you have to revise it several times yourself. I think you should let some other eyeballs on it before you think about submitting it, if submission is your end goal. Also be aware that you're with a flow of a bunch of other people who've done the same thing. So agents are really flooded right now with submissions anyway, so you're probably better sitting on it for a couple more months and then submitting it slightly later on, when everyone else isn't already submitting their Nano projects. There's a reason Nano Bootcamp or Nano Camp Nano, or whatever it is, exists to revise, and it's always a good idea to do a strong revision on anything you write, for everybody. If you're considering independently producing the Nano book that you wrote, then you need to, I believe you need to have, especially if you're earlier on in career, you need to have a professional developmental editor and professional copyright editing. I do both of those things even after 30 books. So for pretty much everything I write except short stories. Yeah, and that's because I believe in, you know, quality assurance and making sure that a book is as good as it can be. Not all authors agree with me. That's just my personal opinion. Lavender has mentioned a sea cucumber, which I actually have not eaten before, but I would definitely give a try to. Jessica asks, do I have any weird talents like folding my tongue and twitching my eyebrow? So one of the reasons that many of my characters arch their eyebrows is because I can't do that. I also cannot do the tongue thing. I do have a, I can do this, or I can put my thumb behind my knuckle. Does that count? I have flexible thumbs. I can touch my hands behind my back and stuff like that. I have certain amount of flexibility for someone of my age, shall we say, but that's just because I've done yoga for most of my adult life. I think. What other weird talents do I have? I can ride a motorcycle. I can drive a dually truck. The big trucks. I'm a really good bicyclist. I can horseback ride. That sort of thing. I have weird sporty talents for somebody who's not sporty at all. I can't ski, but oh, I can do a spin jump. It's been a while. I could do a spin jump on ice skates. I did some figure skating. So there's a weird talent. That in a California girl in particular. Jolene asked, how about developing a writer community? Any suggestions for people in rural areas? Oof, that's a hard one, but there are a lot of online resources, especially right now. So, for example, my romance chapter has disaffiliated from the National Romance Society and is now its own little thing, and we meet online, and we just had a fantastic presentation this morning. So they're great. I can provide a link to that, or what are they called? Hold on. Anyway, I think it's San Francisco area romance writers, something like that. So, you know, that is a community that you join. So eventually we're disaffiliating and reunifying right now. We're doing sort of various things. But they're a great group. They used to be all California locally based writers, but now they're sort of all over the place as members have moved but stayed members. So I think they're open for other people to join. And from within that group, various pods have like bopped off. So like I have a little local pod of writers. Now we meet together regularly just to talk about the emotional side of being writers. We don't actually like do writer revisions with each other. We're just like emotional writer friends, you know, because it turns out like the three of us really wanted that. And we virtually meet now. And then my local city has a writer community. So in the future times, your local library often has resources for writer groups that meet locally. Cafes will occasionally have writer groups meeting locally, so like hang out in a cafe and see who turns up. But the library is a really good resource for that. Clubs, Facebook clubs that like are the town's name or the city's name. So you could look in a local area to see if there's something. Going to small local conventions is a great way to meet writers. So like that might require one journey outside of your immediate territory. And again, we're talking about the future when there's a vaccine and things are happening again. But I met a lot of my early writer friends who are still writer friends at BayCon, which was my local science fiction and fantasy convention, and later at WorldCon. And so that's how I became friends with that. And I talked about this a little bit on the NanoCast, but there's also a thing that happens as you're a writer, which is you kind of meet people at the same stage as you, and that's what you want. You want peers who are going to be moving through this process with you. So you kind of want writers who are about the same stage as you. Finding a mentor is also really good, but it's much harder because the more established a writer is, the busier they are in their own career. But there are mentorship programs in part of the different like larger writing societies like CEFWA or RWA or things like that. So, you know, there's kind of like forays you can do. But I met a lot of mine just hanging out on the writers' tracks at science fiction and fantasy conventions, and they're still really good friends of mine. And then as I got more established in my career, I made friends with other authors when we were on panels together, in the green room together, who then became kind of my lifelong friends who were at that stage of a career together. So, you know, as you move from before your first book comes out and, you know, querying agents and stuff, you have kind of that group of friends. You're all querying together. And then, you know, some people get an agent and then skyrocket and become bestsellers and, you know, leave you in the dust, and others, you know, you get an agent with them and your first debut flops, you know, that kind of a thing. So you end up with this sort of cyclical pattern. And so, you know, I now have sort of pods of groups of writer friends from all of these different stages in my life, which is really fun in my writer life. And it's a little bit like having friends from different jobs. And sometimes you keep a bunch of those friends from that one job that you had for a while, and sometimes you don't. And then the writer world works similarly. But yeah, so online resources, there are a lot out there now. But local chapters or disaffiliated chapters or writer groups that have moved online, most of these used to meet up in like cafes and libraries, and then local small conventions, but that have a writer's track. So those are some of the places that I have met my writer friends. Everybody's talking about crazy things that they can, weird skills that they have. Deanne asks, and I think we're gonna stop people asking questions at this juncture, and I'll get through the last of these questions really quickly. Do I find myself working on more than one story at a time? No, I work really hard not to. And my solution to what a lot of writers call the ooh shiny problem, which is usually when you're about halfway through a book, sometimes 1/3 to halfway through a book, you start to hate that book and you're very excited by all the other things you could be writing instead. But you have to finish the book. You have to. That's the rule. There are very few rules. But if you want to move from being a writer to being an author, you must have finished projects. That is the key. So that ooh shiny must be dealt with in a way that makes it not derail the project that you have to finish. For me, I just take notes. So if I have an ooh shiny project that's waking me up in the middle of the night, something else I really want to write, I just start taking notes on it. If I get enough notes, I start a Scrivener document for that project, because this means I probably will write it. Otherwise, I have one Scrivener doc that is basically just a collection of story ideas for the Parasol verse, for the San Andreas verse, and then for the Tinkered Stars, and then for everything else. And so I just put ideas in there. And if an ooshiny is derailing me, that's all I'm allowed to do. I'm not allowed to actually start writing it as if it were a book. I can only take notes on it, just to make sure it's bled out of my head and it stops bothering me. And then I have to get back to writing what I'm writing. I work better as a focused writer. So, you know, I'm not a pantser. I'm not a discovery writer. I have a pretty strict outline usually. So, I need to be very controlling of my muse. That's my OCD. It might not be yours, but that's what I do. I don't work on two things at a time because I can't work on two things at a time. What I can do is finish a rough draft and then swap for something else. So I can finish a rough draft and then start writing a new project, or I can finish a rough draft and then pick up an old book and do a revision, or get a copy edit pass in at that juncture. But I do tend to try to structure my writing life so that I complete one version of a project before picking up and moving on to another one. I get very, very derailed if I'm like halfway through a rough draft and then a copy edit pass comes in and that's under deadline, so I have to stop halfway through. It's going to take me longer than normal to get back into it. I'm going to have to reread everything that I wrote and stuff like that. So I usually try not to stop anything in the middle for any reason, if possible. Dick asks if I'm an expert on ancient pottery. Yes, some of it. Quite a bit of it, actually. Do I do pottery yourself? Yes, I got into being, so my minor degrees, my former life as an archaeologist, I have a master's of science in materials analysis with a focus on ceramics, glass, and metals, and then I have a master's of field archaeology with a focus on ceramics. So those are my two advanced degrees. My overeducation is in the field of this stuff. Although not exactly this stuff. But, yeah. And I got into ceramics because I was on a classical site, an Etruscan site in northern Italy. I cut my hand open really badly. I still have the scar. And slicing bread. And that effectively took me out of excavating. So I was there as an undergraduate just doing standard, what we would call shovel jockeying, standard excavating. And I couldn't because I had a big old bandage and I couldn't get it dirty. And so that put me into geo-arc, which is I was tromping the forest with a machete, trying to find new sites and doing ground-penetrating radar and exciting scientific stuff like that, which I found really exciting and way more fun than actually digging stuff up. And then after that, they put me into the field laboratory. Most archaeological sites have a field lab attached to them, which is where the artifacts are dealt with once they have been excavated. So they put me into the field lab, and, you know, we were the kind of operation that, you know, everybody pitched in and did everything. And I eventually started cataloging, and they discovered, the supervisors discovered that if they handed me a piece of pottery, I could ID it really quickly because I grew up a potter. I grew up on a kind of hippie, commune-y sort of multi-house property thing, and the woman who lived right across from me was a potter. One of my mother's best friends, who still lives near her, is a potter, and they taught me how to throw pottery. So once the wheel has been introduced, archaeologically speaking, you are in my bailiwick. I can recognize the striations. I'm pretty good at pulling real quickly, whether it's a, you know, what form of vessel it will be. Etruscan has 3 different kinds of pottery, so that socio-economically divided or socio-use divided pottery. So there's a courseware, cookware, and stuff like that. There's a soft or thin fineware, and then there's a funerary or ritual ware called bucro. And so I could ID those really quickly. I knew what a core meant. I just like had all of this innate knowledge. And so the field lab was like, oh, we're going to keep this one. That one we would like to keep. So I went back the following year as a supervisor. And that was it. That was how my journey began. So yes, I am in fact an archaeologist with a focus on ceramics because I started out as a potter, specifically as a potter. Not a ceramicist. I don't do sculptures or anything like that. I don't have any of my own work around, which is very strange. I sold a lot of it. I used to sell at like Christmas fairs and stuff like that. And I specialized in recreative wares. So I would do these mini pots. I've always liked very small things as a person. That's why I collect demi-tasse teacups, the little tiny teacups. So I would make these tiny mini pots that were very influenced by archaeological ancient cultures' designs, like ancient Greek or Etruscan and other parts. I got super into Iznik for a while. I think their design aesthetic is beautiful. That's the late Ottoman Empire, stunning ceramics. So yeah, so I would do, and not like direct recreative, but a little bit more like Bridgerton, where I would take these designs that were informed by ancient design practices, geometric design practices, and then make them sort of brightly colored or differently colored, using different glazes, using access to techniques that they didn't have in the past. I also did experimental archaeology, where I built an updraft Etruscan kiln and attempted to recreate pots of that time period in my mother's backyard, much to her shock and eventual acceptance. When did I decide to become an author? An author happened to me. I've always written. I always knew I wanted to write, but I grew up around poets, beat poets in particular, who were always poor. And I was like, well, writing is clearly not a career. So I thought, archaeologist, academic, woohoo, which is a fine career. It's not exactly, lucrative, but it worked out for me. But I always wrote, because I always loved fiction, and I just love letting my imagination fly and thinking about the world, and I liked the perspective that being enmeshed in history, particularly ancient history, gives me on the modern world, and I feel like it's changed my eye to how I think about humans and culture. Archaeology is part of the anthropology department in most American universities, so I have had a lot of anthropology. So cultures, culture conflicts, culture influx, cultures in flux, cultures interacting with one another is something that very much interests me, and you will see it in a lot of my books, but also in a lot of what I like to read. And so I always wrote, as well as being, at the time on a PhD track and teaching. And then my first book did well and my second book did better. And then it became a matter of, I don't have time to be both a full-time academic and losing my summers to archaeology, which is what you do when you're an excavator. So yeah. Anyway, so I ended up being a writer. Kind of like, whoa, okay, how did that happen? Because I had to choose. I couldn't do them both. I would have done them both if I could have. But there's a level of the success you reach as an author where they want to send you on book tours, and those book tours are during the summer, and I couldn't disappear to Peru for 3 months. It had to be one or the other. And so eventually I was like, okay, there's a lot of things I love about archaeology and about teaching, but academia and the bureaucratic process of academic institutions is not one of those things I love. So I decided to try being an author instead. And 10 years later, that's where I still am. Well, I think that sounds like it's a good place to stop, shall we? I'm sorry, I apologize if I missed your question, anybody, but thank you for everyone who asked questions. I really, really appreciate it. It's why I keep doing these things, because I love the interesting questions that I get and conversations that we have. And I hope you all are doing better in 2021 and are still fighting the good fight and staying as healthy as you can, loving each other and looking after each other, reading and writing if that's your thing. Tell me about something that you love. Hang out in the Parasol Protectorate group and chat, and we'll talk about things that are making us happy. Meanwhile, do something that makes you happy today, and I'll see you next time. I love you all very much. Take care.